Yeah, the face, man.
I know. I'm still like getting used to it. It's the first time I've been like this in a very long time.
I will say it looks good, man. I'm like even when you even by itself, it does look pretty good. But when you did the costume, man, oh my god, that was so amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I am really impressed with how it turned out. Like it actually looked like exactly how it was supposed to look. So I'm proud of that.
Were you an excitable boy when it happened?
No, no, I was not. No, that's illegal.
And welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on this side of the Mississippi. It's been a while since, we actually did a recording. So, I was thinking about, how I was going to actually smoothly transition into, doing, my little, trope at the beginning. And, doing my little intro where I basically scream into the microphone. And I think I nailed it, man. Yeah. So, yeah. How are you, man?
I'm good. I'm good. And so this is a podcast hosted by two, as Ryan would say, dashingly beautiful gentlemen. Or handsome gentlemen, I guess is the proper term, but whatever. Either one tracks. I am the one, the only, the freshly shaven Matthew James Durzick.
And I'm the one, the only, the lookout. It's about to get into Ryan beard growing season, Ryan James Kearns.
And for those of you who don't know, this is a podcast in which the two of us, who share the same middle name, talk about albums that we have listened to and would like the other to listen to. Could be a popular album, like we've talked about Sabrina Carpenter and Charlie XCX this year. Could be some older stuff, like we talked about the Turtles and Charles Mingus. And as we've been discussing a lot lately on Ryan's end of things, he has been taking us into the Jack White multiverse, which reminds me, Ryan, last time out, where did we go?
We journeyed into probably the most essential part of the Jack White multiverse in the band that he was, the most well-known for, the White Stripes, and within the most well-known album within that sphere, Elephant. And it was a really good journey for me to re-examine and revisit that album after, I don't want to say so many years, because, it's been an album that's popped in and out of, my attention for, a couple years now. For those of you who are not familiar with the album itself, Elephant, it contains the biggest Jack White song of all time, that being Seven Nation Army. And from that album alone, I personally saw the many different shades of Jack White and the many different musical stylings that he brings to the table. So for me, it was an excellent journey into that sphere. I know we have one more step into that sphere to go to totally complete that journey, but yeah. Before we even talk about what we're talking about this week, what were your thoughts and feelings about going into the Elephant part of the White Stripes sphere of the Jack White universe?
Pretty much right on par with yours. It was not an album I revisited, more visited for the first time, but man alive. Just a really, really good album front to back. And even the moments where I didn't like it so much were still very tuneful and properly executed. Because, again, it like you said, is the most essential of the White Stripes recordings. And not only that, but really probably one of the more essential recordings, period, in all of the 2000s as far as rock records go. So, yeah, I enjoyed Elephant very much. And ironically enough, we are going to be talking about an album this week that is also considered to be the high point of an artist's career. That also happens to be a album cover that is very red. This week, in lieu of Halloween coming up, I gave Ryan the choice to choose between either robots or werewolves last week at the end of our episode, or 2 weeks ago, really. Because for those of you tuned into the Smashing Pumpkins episode, thank you. But he chose werewolves, and so we're talking this week about the sophomore, well, actually, no, it's the third release by Warren Zevon, singer-songwriter, called Excitable Boy. Now, Warren Zevon, again, singer-songwriter, very well known in the Los Angeles rock scene of the 70s, which featured a lot of different artists, many of whom are featured on this album, like Jackson Browne, Linda Ronstadt, the Eagles, who are not on this album, the likes of J.D. Souther, and many others. And Warren Zevon was sort of like this songwriter's type of singer, and his content was a lot different from that of Jackson Browne or the Eagles, where theirs were more, typical pop profundities and occasional, singer-songwriter storytelling stuff. Warren Zevon was that, except on a much darker level, as we'll get into. Not just a more darker level, but a more cynical, occasionally political, very much the smart guy at the bar of 70s singer-songwriters. Now, as far as my introduction to this album, I knew about the main hit off this, which was Werewolves of London, but I hadn't really given the rest of the album any type of listen, with the exception of the second track, which is Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner. I had listened to it a couple of times at the latter end of my previous career as occasionally doing DJ work for 95.7 FM WMBA. But aside from those two songs, I really had not listened to this album at all. And then I think it was either late March or early April, I was helping my aunt move some stuff, and she had some CDs, and she said, hey, you want to take a couple if you want? And so this was one of them, so I gave it a listen a few weeks later. I was like, oh, okay, this is an album. And so put that on the shelf for a little bit, and then, again, with Halloween rolling around, I decided, you know what, let's revisit this. So here we are.
And my exposure to Warren Zevon here is pretty basic as basic can be. Can you guess what my exposure to this artist is?
You know about Werewolves of London and end of story.
Yeah, pretty much, man. And also for those of you who are aren't even aware of what the song that I'm aware of, which is Werewolves of London. I'm pretty sure you might have heard the Kid Rock song that samples that piano riff. I think the song was called All Summer Long, which was objectively a decent summer song. And that's, yeah. Other than that, when it comes to Warren Zevon as a whole as an artist, that's where my experience begins and ends. So, as is customary with our show here, whenever you mention this artist, I was just like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'm absolutely here for it, man. This is the core idea of the show, for us to expose each other to different artists that we've never listened to before. And yeah, I'm absolutely here for it, man.
I am too, because this album is not just a testament to again, late 70s type of singer-songwriter fare with a twist. It's also a dip into sort of the studio essence that a lot of things were going on with 1970s Los Angeles type of stuff, because basically all the artists tended to record with one another in some way or form, and we're going to get to a good chunk of them throughout this album. So why don't you say we kick it off with Johnny Strikes Up the Band?
So, yeah, and I'll take the lead on this track here, and You know, with this kind of track here, it kind of reminds me, maybe not in the same, like, stylings or sonic texture, like the same kind of song in general of what the when we did the Turtles review, like that opening track on that album. But this is kind of has the same kind of feeling where it's just like, hey, we're introducing this grand, we're warming up a grand idea. We're warming up the band. We're warming up the listener to what the album's gonna bring to the table. And for me, it's a decent opener. Nothing really stands out to me per se. It's not a bad song by any means. I was really impressed with how everything was cleanly produced on this track. And another thing that that kind of caught my attention is the fact that thanks to my research, I discovered that this is a tribute to Johnny Carson. And for those of you who are listening and are wondering what a Johnny Carson is, I mean, I don't blame you. I mean, but for those of you who really want to know what a Johnny Carson is, imagine what Jimmy Fallon does now, but the great grandfather of that, and that's basically what Johnny Carson is. He was a grandfather of the late night show era, and his show ran for many years. And the concept of this song here, Johnny Strikes Up the Band, from what I was able to tell, was basically about the narrator of the song, talking to this other person, trying to cheer them up and being like, hey, Johnny Carson's on, and when Johnny strikes out the band, everything's gonna be good. And for me, it could be almost like a commentary on the I know the idea of content and how we see it in the modern age is drastically different to compare to whenever this song was released. However, I find some parallels in the fact that you get lyrics like "Dry your little eyes, my friend. Let me take you by the hand. Freddie, get ready. Rock steady. When Johnny strikes up the band, they'll be the other person in this dialogue is very sad and everything like that, but oh hey, let me take you by the hand, and when Johnny strikes up the band, everything's gonna be okay. It was just a nice little thing that I found there. But overall, not too much else that stands out in this track for me. Not a bad song by any means, but yeah, overall, a solid, decent way to open up the album.
I agree with you pretty much wholeheartedly. It's a very solid album opener. This is very much in the wheelhouse of what I'd call 70s boogie, especially with the piano being as tight as it is, and a good interlock with the drums and piano. I did not know that it was about Johnny Carson, so I thank you for bringing that up, and that it kind of helps me out for a little later in the show. The lyrics I don't think are super supreme as they are going to be later on, though they are delivered very nicely. I like how on the chorus, at a couple times where it goes, when Johnny strikes up the when, Johnny strikes up the when, I like that part quite a bit. But aside from that, yeah, I pretty much can't really add on much more than you've already talked about. It's a really solid album opener. It sounds great, but it is not in my top three. And for the record, all I have for this episode is a top three. There is nothing at the bottom this time.
I have a top three and I have a bottom one in this record here. I'm right there with you, though, whenever you're talking about, when Warren is vamping on when Johnny strikes up that's a very nice moment. And for me, we talked about this in the Sabrina Carpenter episode, and it kind of strikes true here with tracks like this. The performances are solid, but there's nothing really stand out-ish. However, the vibes are are essentially there, and it's what carries the track for the most part. And like for me, like this, like I know we talked about the good song bucket many of times in this podcast here, but like a song like this lands in the good song bucket because there's nothing really like that can really sink it, but it does enough that like it just, it's pleasant to my ears and I really enjoy it. And like the nod to Johnny Carson and like the kind of like deeper meanings that I was able to like extract from it keeps it at a nice like good song bucket territory for me.
Agreed.
So the next track is Roland, the Headless Thompson Gunner. Not my nickname in high school.
Not my nickname in high school either, for probably good reason. This song is something else. Basically, it slows things down sound-wise, and the way that it's intro, just this like sort of dark brooding piano, almost like trying to think what it was. It was the one track I really liked off of Angel in Real Time, where it was just David LaPepe singing about all of his family members and just, like I said, kind of pissing everybody off. That's the kind of vibe I got from the start of this track. And then it goes into a nice groove. And the way that Warren sings this song is so fantastic. This song has such a great use of dynamics. The verses are very well hushed, but it builds up throughout the song. And the choruses, the way they transition from the first chorus to sort of the double sort of the two types of voices that are going on the second chorus to the third chorus basically being a variation of the first chorus, I thought was a really nice touch. And the lyrics, for those who don't know, this is a story about a guy named Roland who apparently was really good at shooting a Thompson gun. And so apparently he was hired by the government to take down some enemies. And he was one of the best gunmen in all the land. So someone pulls a coup on him, blasts his head off, and spoiler alert, that doesn't kill him. He goes around headless and says, all right, who's the SOB that killed me? I'm going to kill you too. It is such a weird, twisted, dark song. And again, it goes from them singing Roland the Thompson Gunner to Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner as if nothing has changed. Which not only is funny, but it adds to a nice narrative touch that this song provides. I really dig this song a lot, so much so that I have it at number 1 in my top 3.
Maybe in another world, like this song could easily be. Well, I don't want to say easily be my top song, or even like it's not in my top 3. But like whenever like I first was spinning this song for the intended purposes of more like detailed listening, I was like, oh, like a lot of the same thoughts and feelings that I had about like Johnny Strikes Up the Band was riding with me for the first part of Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner until that lyric and that like plot twist that you mentioned where it's talking about that son of a bitch Van Owens blew off Roland's head, and I was just like, oh, hot damn. Okay, we're gonna M. Night Shyamalan this bitch here. But yeah, I really can't add too much else to what you already talked about because you basically hit a lot of my thoughts and feelings about this track as a whole right on the head. It's funny that the way that I walked away from this song here, it was almost like a commentary on like how America as a country, as an entity, treats its military and veteran personnel, where maybe like hey, you're talking about like how this Roland guy was the best Thompson gunner, so the CIA decided that they wanted to kill Roland. And it was just an interesting commentary that I kind of picked up on, and a lot of people can probably dig a little bit further into extracting metaphors for the Vietnam War, and just how America's treated its veterans after they've exited service. But overall, though, this song is just simply fantastic, and for me, it definitely took the album's momentum up a notch.
I can understand that. I think, again, what really got me about the song is, again, the way that a lot of... It's not just the story itself, which is great. The lyrics are great. But the way that, again, the background vocals, which are delivered by the likes of Jackson Browne, I think J.D. Souther's another one, and a couple others, really do add sort of this very almost musical type of veneer to this song, which I really dug. And really, again, it really is a testament to Zevon's knowledge, his cynicism, his dark sense of humor, and I really can't say too many other bad things about it. It's a really, really good song, and again, at number one for me.
So, pivoting over to the title track of the record, Excitable Boy, and so we go from Johnny Strikes Up the Band, which both you and I basically described as pure vibes, solid song, no complaints, to Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner, which for you and I, it took the album's momentum up a whole different level. For you, significantly higher than me, because you were definitely a lot higher on the track than I was. Not a bad track by any means, it was a simply fantastic track. To just, Excitable Boy is a crazy song, my dude. On the surface, for me, the vibes are pretty chill, but the lyrics, the lyrics, they are dark with 4 R's and 3 K's. Even, not even diving into the lyrics quite yet, but, for me, I did dig the background vocals, and you know me, whenever I hear a sax in the background of any sort of track, it tickles a funny bone for me as a sax player. And one thing that I'm going to commend Warren on in this track here, and it goes throughout the rest of the album, to be perfectly honest with you, is his piano work is just simply fantastic. It's really, really good, really, really solid. But the lyrics, for me, so, in the previous track, I talked about, and I drew the metaphor between, how Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner was, criticizing America for, how it's treating its military personnel. To this track here, for me, it was drawing I don't want to, maybe a metaphor, but more of a criticism, or I would say it's a metaphor, of how, we excuse certain behaviors in society because, oh, hey, this is just a young man and he doesn't know any better. He's just, pressured by society. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, you could probably, do a simple Twitter search and you can find plenty examples of, behaviors like this. But, lyrics that I want to highlight here that really just kind of just blew my mind hole wide open. Read out, he went down to dinner in his Sunday best, excitable boy, they all said, and he rubbed the pot roast all over his chest. Even that imagery alone is just simply amazing and just completely just off the wall, bonkers. But then just the ending set of lyrics take everything to a new level in terms of just be completely dark. So, the set of lyrics that I'm gonna, omit from here, it's talking about, a case of, sexual assault that, this excitable boy did. And the ending set of lyrics that I want to highlight are, After 10 long years, they let him out of the home. Excitable boy, they all said. And he dug up her grave and built a cage with her bones? What? Like, what is this, man? This is, yeah. When I heard that, and just within the context of, like, the whole song, I was completely blown away by it. And, yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. This is my favorite song on the record by a country mile. Like it's very rare for a song to completely floor me like this. But dude, like the only comparison I can think that I can make to this track here is whenever we did the Smiths review of The Queen Is Dead. And I forget what song it was, but it has that similar kind of feel where it's just like, having silly lyrics with a chill atmosphere. For those of you who want to check out and find out what song I'm talking about, please check out that review. It's actually pretty early in our catalog. But yeah, long story short, Excitable Boy, it makes me an excitable boy for just how crazy it is.
I am pretty much right on the money with you there. I have it at number 2 in my top 3. For a lot of the reasons that you just mentioned, the fact that it's such an even darker and more twisted song than Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner. And the fact that it's built on this backdrop of almost like a 50s soda shop, American Graffiti type of backdrop. Again, his piano playing's great. The saxophone is great. And the fact that the backup vocalists on this song, the females going ooh, wah, ooh, are none other than Linda Ronstadt and Jennifer Warnes, makes this song even funnier. Because for those of you who don't know, I mean, Linda Ronstadt, very famous singer, sang a lot of hits throughout the 70s like You're No Good, When Will I Be Loved. Not really a songwriter in her own right. In fact, Warren Zevon wrote a lot of songs for her, including one that became a hit in Poor, Poor, Pitiful Me around 1977. And Jennifer Warnes is most famous for 2 songs, both duets, one Up Where We Belong with Joe Cocker, and the other one, a duet with Bill Medley, called I've Had the Time of My Life. Yes, the female singer from the Dirty Dancing hit is singing back up on this song about an excitable boy who dumps pot roast all over his chest and is committing the most heinous of crimes known to humanity. That, to me, is incredibly hilarious. It is just like, because again, it's such a wholesome vibe mixed with lyrics that are just like, wait, what? I'm sorry, did you, what? So, yeah, no, this song, to me, is fantastic and really, again, emblematic of the dark cynicism that Warren Zevon could bring to the table. And again, the band sounds fantastic. The lyrics are great. I just couldn't put it past Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner, just because I think the lyrics on that song are a little bit better. I think the dynamics are a little bit better. And this song, for all of the knockout craziness that it is, it's so short. It's like 2.5 minutes long. It's just like, anyway, there was this terrible person. Bye. It's like, wait, hold on.
Oh, man. It kind of like that kind of sentiment reminds me of the Mountain Goats review that we did, the fall of the high school star running back. For those of you who want to check out that review, please check it out. We reviewed All Hail West Texas. Excellent fun time. But yeah, dude, like, I'm just gonna be completely blown away by this track here specifically. Like I mentioned, like for the longest time, all I knew that Warren Zevon did was Werewolves of London, and yeah, like if this would have been my first introduction to Warren Zevon, I would have been like, oh, okay, cool. Not cool, but like, just like, oh, you really went there. Oh my god, you went there. But yeah, overall, like, fantastic track. And if, ladies and gentlemen, if you take anything away from this review that me and Matt are doing right now on this album, please check out Excitable Boy. It is definitely worth your time.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. Now, you mentioned that the only other track you had heard of Warren Zevon was Werewolves of London, which, ironically enough, is the next track on this album. And once again, we have a song with some pretty dark lyrics. Like, I didn't realize... Like, again, this is another song that, for as jovial as it sounds and as very iconic as that chorus is, where it's just, ooh, Werewolves of London. Like, you actually listen to the track, it's not nearly as dark as Excitable Boy or Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner, but it's not too far off, honestly. It's very cynical because you almost wonder if these are actual werewolves or human beings in a metaphor as werewolves. I'm going to go with a metaphor on that one. And again, the groove is great. The piano playing is fantastic. And once again, we have another instance of everybody in LA knowing each other. Because I don't know if you found this out, but the bassist and drummer on this track are none other than John McVie and Mick Fleetwood, respectively, i.e. the bassist and drummer of Fleetwood Mac. So they're on this track. And again, not something you'd expect from a track as dark as this. Again, the little references to Lon Chaney Jr. and a lot of different places around England. And again, some of the lyrics are just very funny, like, his hair was perfect. I'd like to meet his tailor. It's the only problem I have with it is it feels a little too in-jokey. Like, it feels like if you don't get the joke, you'd have to look it up. Like, Excitable Boy, you know what that's about. Roland, you know what that's about. This one, you may have to do a tiny bit of research if you want to. But if not, the groove's really good too. There's a reason this song's a hit, because that groove is essential. Again, Kid Rock found that out much later on. And yeah, 1, 2, 3. I got Werewolves of London right at number 3 in my top 3, so bang, bang, bang.
The rest of the album's going to be downhill for you, man.
Not too downhill, but we'll get there.
Yeah, but for me, Werewolves of London, like, for me, it is a fun song. It's not really a standout song-ish for me, which, like, makes me, like, whenever you, suggest, like, I know I was one who picked this album for the review, and whenever you were like, oh, hey, this is the album, I'm like, oh, okay, well, we'll see what else Warren Zevon has to, like, have to offer. This is not my least favorite song on the album by, like, any means, because if I did that, I think I might have some fair criticisms, but, like, overall, like, the vibes here are pretty solid. That piano riff, like you mentioned, the groove is absolutely, like, you can ride it all day long, and it's just a fun time. Like, you can't really complain about it. The chorus is a great time. I like how Warren is almost trying to act like he's a werewolf, where he's like, oh, Werewolves of London. Like, it's a solid good time. Really can't complain about it. And I did appreciate the different imagery, the different, like, images that you can get in your head while listening to the verses about, like, all these, like, predators that live in the area. Another commentary on, like, toxic masculinity and, like, just, like, how society is as a whole. And the lyrics that I want to highlight here that exemplify that are, he's that hairy hand gent who ran amok in Kent. Lately, he's been overheard in Mayfair. You better stay away from him. And, like, even backing out of that set of lyrics, like, the whole track begins with a lyric that reads, I saw a werewolf with a Chinese menu in his hand walking through the streets of Soho in the rain. Like, this simple person's just walking down the street with a, like, a food menu in his hand is a werewolf. Like, because you never know, like, like the person that's, like, crossing you, walking by you while you're walking down the street, if they're a decent person or if they're a horrible person. You never know. That's society nowadays. And it's funny that, Warren disguises this message behind what can ultimately be a fun and vibey song. This song did not land in my top 3, but I did appreciate what it brought to the table.
2 more thoughts on this track I have. One, I'm right there with you about it being sort of a fun vibe. You can almost imagine like a cartoonish way, like a werewolf in a nice 3-piece suit sitting down to eat Chinese food in the middle of London. And also, it was a real close tie between this and another track for the number 3 spot. And I picked this one because, as I've, come to realize, pop music is not a bad thing. And the fact that this song was able to put Warren's name out there and get people to listen to this album, as a single was meant to do back in the day, I think that goes a long way. Again, there's another track coming up, which I think is close, but this one just barely edged it out. So yeah, this completes my top 3 at number 3, Werewolves of London.
So, moving on to Accidentally Like a Martyr. And yeah, it's we go from like, a slow build up from like, Johnny strikes with the band, getting higher with the Roland, the Headless, Thompson, Gunner, to Excitable Boy, and like, a little bit of a plateau with Werewolves of London, and then Accidentally Like a Martyr for me, man. It deflates the album's momentum by, like, I don't want to say a country mile because that might be a little bit rude and a little bit mean for me to say, but there really isn't anything notable about the track at all. And like you probably can, provide a little bit more of a little bit more of a highlight filled discussion about it. But for me, it was one of the tracks that kind of like, went in one ear out the other for me. And like, just for me, like, the instrumentation's pretty bland. There really isn't any notable or funny lyrics, at least from what I was able to like, sink my teeth into. And the instrumental breaks in this track here are actually a little bit annoying, and the piano lick where it's just like he's like slapping on the keys, like, I actually kind of got a little bit annoyed by that because it really didn't add too much to the track for me. Yeah, like, as you can probably tell, this is my least favorite track on the album by the way I'm describing it. But yeah, dude, like, I don't know, like, there's just, am I crazy? Am I like, accidentally like a martyr for like, how much I'm hating on this track here, or like, do I have valid points?
I think you have some valid points. It definitely does derail the momentum, again, of 3 great songs right in a row, arguably 4. And realistically, you're right about the lyrics. There really isn't much home to write about, except for the fact that, hey, for the first time since the beginning of the album, there's no murder. So, cool. That being said, I didn't mind this track as much as you. I actually, the major disagreement I have with you on it is I like the piano bridge. I thought it flipped things around kind of nicely. It kind of delved away from its own boredom in a sense. I thought it was kind of jazzy towards the middle there. And I thought that the harmonies from singer-songwriter Carla Bonoff were also very good. But that being said, ultimately, this is an album track as album tracks go. Definitely slows things down. Definitely, I almost want to say this is almost Warren trying to rid himself, or not, maybe not rid himself, but show that he can do things aside from cynical, dark tracks and, sing sort of like heartfelt ballads, even in sort of a guy at the end of the bar type of sense. It doesn't really land as strong as the really cynical, messed up tracks, but I didn't mind it as much. Not so much that I would have it at the bottom, but I can understand where you're coming from.
I'm glad that you you basically, I don't want to say like validated my opinions or like made me feel vindicated with them. But like I'm glad I wasn't like completely crazy for me just basically not digging the track there. But I do have a question before we get into the next track, which is Nighttime in the Switching Yard.
And what is that question?
So I know I didn't accidentally like a Martyr. But for those of you, for the listeners out there who are currently listening to us on their podcasting platform of choice, and if they like what we're bringing to the table, and let's face it, I mean, yeah, they probably do like what they're hearing from us at this point. And if they wanted to, show support in order to make sure that we keep pumping out episodes like this on a weekly basis, what is the absolute best way for them to show support to us?
The best way that they can show support to us is by, again, listening to some of our past episodes. They haven't caught up on them, whether they go to our Spotify page, our YouTube page where we post videos featuring the episodes, going there, giving it the highest rating they can, giving us a like, leaving a comment, sharing it with their friends on social media, whether it be on Facebook or Twitter, where we both have pages for Hey Listen to This. It's just Hey Listen to This on Facebook, at TT Hey Listen on Twitter. You can also follow us on other socials as well. I believe we are on Threads as well, if I'm not mistaken. And then also we are able to be contacted if you want to give us some feedback or perhaps suggest a future episode. You can contact us at ttheylisten@gmail.com. And share the episodes with your friends, put them on your feed, and give us some good feedback. And again, thank you for supporting us throughout what now is 1 year of Hey Listen to This. And by the way, Ryan, happy anniversary!
Happy anniversary, you gorgeous, gorgeous man, you!
I can't believe it. Again, I looked at my memories this morning. I was like, has it really officially been a year since the Hot Fuss episode? Which, by the way, if you want to listen back to that and see how we've evolved, quote unquote, feel free to do that. That's on our pages as well. But back to Excitable Boy by Warren Zevon. Track number 6 is Nighttime in the Switching Yard. And this song, I'm thinking, is supposed to be a parody of disco. Because this album was released in 1978. And this is when disco was at its biggest. So I'm thinking this was Warren and the boys trying to make a parody of a disco song. The problem is they screwed up and made an actually very good song in the disco sphere. This is the other song I had in the running for my top 3 with Werewolves of London. And the reason this was up so high on my radar, there's a few reasons. Number one, the drummer Jeff Porcaro, who was the drummer of Toto, and was also the drummer on several tracks throughout the 80s, such as Michael Jackson's Beat It, for example. Also, if you've heard Lowdown or Lido Shuffle by Boz Scaggs, he's the drummer on those two. Very, very high-end drummer. One of the best drummers in the studio of the 70s and 80s. I digress. Him and bassist Bob Glaub are locked in. The groove on this track is tremendous. And I also like the harmonies on the choruses as well. It's a very almost sort of dark harmony with the vocals, and the way that the chords come in are really nice too. And another reason I like the song so much is earlier this year, I was driving around Erie, waiting for my girlfriend and her friends to be wrapped up at dance recital at the Warner Theater. And I was just driving through the city and this song came on. And driving at night with this song playing in the background is such a beautiful vibe. Like that's those kind of moments you cherish for your life if you're like any sort of like music lover. Just like, oh, this moment feels so right. So yeah, this song very much was dangerously flirting with my top 3, maybe even my top 2. But ultimately, I can't do that because it's just, I mean, because again, outside the vibes, there's really not a whole lot there. I do like the pun at the end of the song, which is, listen to the train, listen to the track, as in, hey, listen to this track, it's disco. You want to listen to it, right? But aside from that, it's basically just sort of a pun, basically like about train tracks and set to a disco beat. It's not really much, but again, if we were ranking the song from 1 to 9, this would easily be at number 4 for me. It's just a great groovy track, man.
I am right there with you, except for the note that this song has cracked my top 3 at number 3. And it's just for the simple fact of like a lot of stuff that you've already mentioned, like that, just the groove that just surrounds this track is just so absolutely infectious. And like even like a couple of like notes I want to highlight here. The instrumental hits at the ends of like the phrases, and verses here are fantastic. And just the instrumental break here is just like, absolutely great. It absolutely, this is how you do an instrumental break. I know, like, they're not the same kind of track at all, but like, what accidentally, like, a Martyr did with their instrumental break was kind of like, whatever. It was basically pointless, in my humble opinion. But the instrumental break in this track here, absolutely great. I love it. And just like the overall just playfulness of like the groove to even start out is really great. No real lyrics of note here in terms of like just anything I want to highlight. It's more based on like feel, and it executes that to the T. Really not much else to really like piggyback off of. But yeah, easily in my top 3 at number 3 for me.
I'm glad it is, because that, again, it is such an infectious track as far as, again, the groove. And again, I think the one thing I did see, I want to, because I did watch the video for this on YouTube, and from what I could gather, I'm guessing Warren himself did not like this song that much, because one of the comments, and again, YouTube comments, take them all with a grain of salt, but the one comment I did see, I guess, someone had called for this out in a show soon after the album was released, and Warren was just like, yeah, right, and didn't play it. So I'm guessing he didn't like the song a whole lot, that he didn't like keep it in his repertoire for so long. But that's kind of a shame, because again, this song just slaps. Like, it's just, again, a great vibe type of song. But I'm glad it's in your top 3. Again, very close to making it to mine.
So, the next track here is Veracruz. And for me, this track here is, it is pretty interesting in that for a lot of the tracks here, well, I don't want to say a lot of the tracks. Some of the tracks in this album here, I've drawn out like metaphors of like Warren being like cynical about like certain like points of view. In that like you get Werewolves of London, where it's just basically talking about like hey, society's basically like awful. Roland the Headless Thompson gunner, criticizing how veterans are treating and like how the military is as a whole, and like even with Excitable Boy excusing toxic masculinity behaviors. With Veracruz, we kind of get a little bit of another like I don't want to say a criticism, but like just another turn of point of view. And that was the phrasing that I was looking for there. In that, in this track here, where like this track is basically about like I forget what the exact event was, but I think it's when like United States invaded like Mexico or something like that. I might be completely talking out of my butt right now, but it's talking from the point of view of the people that are just like trying to live their lives, and they heard Woodrow Wilson's guns and they heard Maria crying, and for me, it's a very interesting track. I like it a lot. It's not on my top three. But I do appreciate what it had to build, like bring to the table, especially with like just the very descriptive lyrics, and you can really place yourself within the atmosphere of the song. And yeah, like even lyrics that are like reading, I swear it was my father's voice saying, if you stay you will all be slain, you must leave now, you have no choice, take the servants and ride west, keep the child close to your chest, when the American troops withdraw, let Zapta take the rest. My apologies for grossly mispronouncing that word there. But yeah, overall, really, really good song. I really did dig Warren's vocals here in this track. The songwriting's pretty cut and dry, in my humble opinion, but it's not the main focus of the song. I did really appreciate it as much as, like, you guys are able to tell by me just talking about the song as a whole. And another thing I'm going to highlight is the Spanish spoken bridge in this track here was another nice touch. Overall, though, not in my top three, but this song lands like a hair above the good song bucket into the great song bucket for me.
I'm pretty much right there with you. This is the one track on the album where I feel like later on down the line, when I give it like repeated listens, I might come to like this song a whole lot more. But I like it a lot now as it is. It obviously is not my top three. I've already exfoliated that into existence. To me, this felt more like a lyrical bent similar to Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner, mixed with the style of Accidentally Like a Martyr. Like, this is basically like Accidentally Like a Martyr, except a lot more political, a lot more intelligent, and a lot more explorative, especially, like you say, on that spoken Spanish bridge that shows that Warren knows exactly what he's talking about and has, studied these kinds of things very, very detailed. Again, the fact that it's as soft and as slow and as sort of pretty as Accidentally Like a Martyr kept this one out of my top three. But again, it's very smart, it's very intelligent, and kind of closer to Roland than it is Accidentally.
So, are you ready to talk about the penultimate track on the record, Tenderness on the Block?
I am ready to talk about the penultimate track on the album, which is Tenderness on the Block. And this is a song that Warren Zevon wrote with Jackson Browne, who again has made a couple appearances already on this record, singing backup vocals. And this is another fascinating song. Again, a slower song, more of a ballad. And basically the theme of this song is basically talking to parents, being like, listen, your daughter's going to grow up, she's going to find love out on the streets, and there's really not a whole lot you can do about it. At some point, she's going to grow up and be on her own. And this is a very interesting take on that. Maybe a bit of a cynical, dark take in a sense. I think the harmonies on the song are nice. They're not super outstanding, but they're nice. And again, I feel like not only Warren's piano playing, but his voice very much is set for the moment. Again, not my top three. It's not a super standout track, but I really did think it was nice. This almost feels like a album track that Springsteen would have wrote. Sort of a very find love on the streets, and, times are changing, and you got to get with the times, man, type of song. But yeah, I dug this track.
I'm right there with you on this track. Like, for me, this might have jumped down from the good song bucket into the not a bad song bucket for me. Like, it does enough to, like, just make sure it keeps itself out of that bucket. But yeah, it has a nice groove to it. I really did dig the vocal and piano work here. And the lyrics telling the story about the effects of seeing your kids grow up are like, a good nod. And it just, lyrics that exemplify that are, Daddy, don't you ask her when she's coming in, and when she's home, don't ask her where she's been. She's going out. She has a young man waiting. And it's a nice message for, like, parents that are, like, just seeing their kids grow up over the years. And yeah, I really can't add too much more to this track here. For me, like, it's not nearly as, like, mind numbing as, like, accidentally like a Martyr, but it's kind of like along the same kind of vibes as, like, Johnny Strikes Up the Band, where it's just like, it's a good vibe song. I dug it. It was a pleasant experience for me to, like, like, listen to.
All right, so we have reached the final song on Excitable Boy, and that is the song Lawyers, Guns, and Money. And Ryan, I believe you can close us out.
Yeah, so, ladies and gentlemen, if you are playing along at home and trying to figure out, like, what are our top 3 songs that we, like, if sometimes we don't have, like, a full top 3, but I said I had a top 3 and a bottom 1. The bottom 1 was, Accidentally Like a Martyr. My top 3, number 1, Excitable Like a Boy. Number 3, Nighttime in the Switching Yard. Well, we've ran out of tracks. So, Lawyers, Guns, and Money it is. And for me, this track here, it's just a fantastic way to end off the album, my good sir. I love the feel of it. Just how it basically rides out that feel of, like, send lawyers, guns, and money, and, like, basically, like, the urgency that you hear behind Warren's vocals here, where he's talking about, like, I went home with a waitress the way I always do. How was I to know she was with the Russians too? An innocent bystander, somehow I got stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I'm down on my luck. Like, and, like, you get lyrics like, I'm riding in Honduras, I'm a desperate man, send lawyers, guns, and money, the shit has hit the fan. Like, it's, you really get the sense of, like, between that, the instrumental backdrop, and what Warren's singing about, like, things has really, really hit the fan for him, and it was just an absolute pleasant experience for me to, like, enjoy within the context of the album, and just the song by itself. And just another note I have about this track here is the hand claps at the end are a great time for me. Like, I did appreciate that random texture there. It did add a lot. And for me, like I alluded to, this is my second favorite song on the album, and I absolutely did appreciate it.
I like it too. It, to me, goes in this good song bucket, not in my top 3. And honestly, I think the problem I have with this song is the fact that it almost feels like a joke song. Like, I don't believe that Warren Zevon would ever get himself in a situation where he would need lawyers, guns, and money stat. Like, this is obviously a joke about a rich man or some type of, famous person being like, oh, crap, I have made a terrible mistake. Send resources that most normal people don't have access to that quickly as you can. Which is a funny joke. But the problem is that it seems a little too, like, it almost feels like Warren's singing it as if he believes it, which I don't, based off the empathy and the smarts that he's shown throughout the entirety of the album, I don't necessarily believe him here. I just think it was played a little too straight on the nose. Like, it doesn't, like, go too far into joke territory. It was like, oh, well, clearly they're just going balls to the wall. But at the same time, it's not, so dark and brooding and desperate that you're like, oh, well, maybe he actually does need lawyers, guns, and money. But all that being said, that's nitpicking. Otherwise, I'm pretty much right there with you. The groove is great. The lyrics are great in their own right. The hand claps at the end almost give a sort of island vibe to this track, which is nice because, again, if you're off the coast somewhere and you need help, might as well, get everybody to clap their hands for you. Yeah, it's a solid ending to the track, or excuse me, ending to the album. And yeah, I really don't have much more to say about that you haven't already touched on.
Yeah, and it just, you know me, I'm always a sucker for sequencing, and how, like, you know, this track here ends the album with the notion of, like, oh, hey, like, you know, you got to send help and, like, you know, send lawyers, guns, and money. It almost seems like a last standing kind of track for me. So, like, that's what kind of, like, you know, made it pop up into my, you know, top 3 at number 2. Excitable Boy, nothing's touching that. And Nighttime in the Switching Yard, that was more of an instrumental, like, showcase of what, like, you know, Warren can bring to the table when it comes to, like, you know, composing, like, a funky kind of track. This was just a big ballady kind of track, and I absolutely did appreciate it, man.
I think it's a good song, and this album is full of good songs. But the album has come to a close, which can only mean one thing.
We did it.
We did it. We unleashed our inner Excitable Boys.
You absolutely went there, man. Like, you know, the door was wide open, and you were, like, coming through, like, Roland the Headless Thompson gunner.
But seriously, if you commit any of the acts in Excitable Boy, you should be thrown in prison. I'll go first as far as my review. This album is fantastic, man. Like, there's not a bad track on this album for me. Like, even the lower ones, like, in my opinion, Accidentally Like a Martyr or Lawyers, Guns, and Money, have some nice moments to it. And every single track has that. Every single track has a moment where you're like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing. And it's not so bland that it's just kind of like, meh. Like, it makes you think. It makes you realize what the songs are about. It's produced phenomenally. It's performed phenomenally. And again, the highlights of, you know, Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner or Excitable Boy, or Werewolves of London or Nighttime in the Switching Yard, again, are just songs that deserve repeated listens over and over and over again. And if this had been the only album that Warren Zevon had ever released, that'd be one thing. He's released several up until his passing in 2003. But man, this album is a good time. And that's why I'm giving it a 9 out of 10.
So, for me, this was another album that you brought to my attention where, like, it was completely, I don't want to say completely out of my wheelhouse, but when we began the review, I basically only knew Werewolves of London. And thanks to, like, you know, our concept of, like, our show here and this review here, I was absolutely blessed with, like, you know, several great songs like Lawyers, Guns, and Money, Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner, Excitable Boy, Nighttime in the Switching Yard, and, like, even tracks like Veracruz, which are, like, you know, didn't land in my top 3, but I really did appreciate what it had to bring to the table. I did appreciate, like, the, like, you know, the imagery that, like, you know, Warren brought to the table in terms of his lyrics. His performances were solid. And then even, like, you know, the criticism and the cynicism that he displays throughout the whole album is, you know, it's pretty solid and pretty great. Not a fan of Accidentally Like a Martyr, like I said when we were discussing that track, but I am not gonna lie. This was a really great experience for me to, like, you know, dive into, and for me, I'm gonna rate Excitable Boy by Warren Zevon a solid 8 out of 10.
So that averages out our scores to a 8.5 out of 10 because
math.
So, I had a real struggle trying to pick my next album to recommend based off of Excitable Boy, but right at the start you mentioned Johnny Carson. That made it very easy for me. The album I'm going to recommend is also from the late 70s. It's also pretty dark considering who's singing it. It also is a tribute to Johnny Carson, and it also features a lot of great keyboard work, and that is the album The Beach Boys Love You. This album is very much the Beach Boys in their most mature, twisted, sort of nostalgic, but also beaten and weary type of presentation yet. A lot of good songs on there, a lot of good harmonies as you would expect from the Beach Boys, but a lot of darkness that you would not expect. And very much like this album fits right into the mold of the late 70s that, again, sort of was the dark underbelly that the utopia of the 60s was projecting. So The Beach Boys Love You would be my next recommended album based off of Excitable Boy.
I struggled with my next album recommendation here, to be honest with you. But I'm mainly gonna go off of vibes and just overall feel. And there was one album that kind of caught my attention, and when I did do a drive by of it in terms of preparation for the review here today, I'm going to stick by it, and it is an album by the only, the great and late David Bowie. And the album is The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. And for me, that David Bowie album has, big choruses that kind of vibe pretty well. Doesn't have nearly the same amount cynicism and just the overall social commentary that this album that we just literally got done reviewing has. But for me, the vibes are there. It's a great album. I'm sticking with that recommendation. Good sir.
I have yet to listen to that album, and I really need to stop pussyfooting around and get to it, because that's for many, that's one of the seminal albums of the 1970s. So I'll have to check that one out. But Ryan, not only are we about to head into the last leg of the Jack Whiteverse, we are also about to review, as my tables tell me, record number 50 in our show's history. So what do you have planned?
So, when it comes to, selecting a album that we're going to review out of Jack White's solo studio career, because basically that's the last leg of the Jack White, sphere that we have to approach, because, we've done the Raconteurs with Consolers of the Lonely, we've done Dead Weather with Whorehound, we've done White Stripes with Elephant. The only other thing we gotta do is a Jack White solo album. I decided to put up two albums that really kind of show two different sides of Jack White. One album we are both very familiar with, and the other album, it's an album that we're both not as familiar with, and they couldn't. Well, they're pretty. The one album is basically kind of like a blend of a lot of Jack White styles. The other album is basically just one kind of style in its own right. So the only way that I could come up with an idea and a concept for you to actually pick the albums here is I'm going to have you pick a number. And that number is either 41 or 40.
I'm going to go with 41.
All right, sir. So, for our 50th album that we are going to review in the history of the show, and to cap off the Jack White multiverse experience that we've been on for the past month or so, we are going to be reviewing the 2012 album by Jack White, and that album is Blunderbuss, which was his debut studio release. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited for our next review, my dude.
I am too. It has been many a moon since I've listened to Blunderbuss, but I know there are a couple tracks off that album that I really enjoy, so I am looking to go down this road one more time.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you've not experienced the album that me and Matt are going to be talking about in our next review, once again, it is Blunderbuss by Jack White. Please check it out before next week's review. That way you're familiar with what me and Matt are going to be talking about. That way you actually have opinions about what we were going to be talking about. And you can, just enjoy, a brand new album. And if it's been a minute since you've actually checked out the album and you want to, check it out, it's still there for you and for your listening pleasure. Just capping off this review here as a whole, thank you, Matt, for bringing this album here to my attention, to the table. I really did appreciate what it had to, what it brought to the table. I'm going to be remembering tracks like Excitable Boy, Veracruz, and even Nighttime in the Switching Yard for I don't want to say years to come, but it's gonna be within it has expanded my musical palette, and I really did appreciate what this album was as a whole.
I do too, and I hope that whoever listens to this episode does in fact listen to this album. They should listen to the tracks. They should listen to that train whistle whine.
I see what you did there.